It's been a little over 1 month since my last devlog, so it's about time I share my progress again. As some of you may know, I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing, and I also have a full-time job, meaning I really only have time to work on this game during my free time. Because of this, some days, like on the weekends, I can work on the game for most of the day, and some days I only work on it for a couple minutes or not at all. So let's go ahead and see how much progress I made over the last month developing my frog-themed turn-based dungeon crawler. So in the last devlog I covered, let me check my notes, 18 new relic items, oh geez. Anyways, all of these new items were unnamed and missing sprites, so I asked you guys in the comments for ideas and let's just say there were a lot to choose from. I'm just going to start showing various relics in the background while I talk. I was trying to think of an interesting way to show all the relics off without reciting a grocery list. I feel like a lot of devlogs fall into this trap where you just end up going through a list of new features or changes and it ends up being kinda boring. And it's not like the relic effects are new in this case, it's the same stuff that I showed in the previous devlog, so if you're interested in the details of that, check out the previous video. Anyways, I ended up slightly adapting some of the ideas that were listed, so if you see something that looks similar to what you commented, I probably took the idea and warped it a little bit. I've been thinking about items a lot recently, and I definitely underestimated the amount of missing art that I needed to work on, which ended up eating away a bunch of time. What I'm trying to say is I've still got a ton of item ideas that I need to develop. At this point in development, there are around 26 relics that exist in the game, which is pretty good, but I've gone ahead and also organized all of my relic ideas into a spreadsheet, and I still have around 35 additional relics that I haven't even started working on yet, that I would like to have in at least the first version of the game. And this isn't even including the 10 active items that I also want to add in, which is a whole different thing. Anyways, the reason why I bring this up is because I really liked not having to do any work in regards to coming up with the item names, so if you're interested in brainstorming some ideas for new item names, stick around to the end of the video and I'll go through 3 new relic effects that I haven't named or made the art for yet. So in most roguelikes where there is some sort of randomized item or card system, there is usually some form of rarity involved. It is extremely difficult to have every single item effect perfectly balanced, and you probably wouldn't even want that anyways. Because when you're playing a roguelike and you start a new run and right away you find a very rare, overpowered item, you know that run is going to be nuts. In the previous devlog, I mentioned I was planning on adding rarity levels to the relics. This has now been fully implemented. Standard relics can be broken into the following rarities: common, rare, and legendary. These values are not final, but currently you have a 70% chance of finding a common relic, a 25% chance of finding a rare relic, and a 5% chance of finding a legendary relic. While working on this, I also made it so that duplicate relics do not appear in chests anymore. And if you don't want any of the relics that do appear inside of a chest, the player can now take some essence instead to be used to upgrade the relics later on. Speaking of upgrading your relics, this is the main project that has been eating up most of my time recently. There were a lot of suggestions in the last video to add an upgrade room every 5 floors, which is great because that's what I was planning on doing anyways. So I started by adapting my grid generation script to include another room type. I needed this room type to take a specific room shape because I don't really want this room to take one of the larger layouts. I also needed this room to spawn specific objects onto specific tiles instead of the usual randomness that the regular enemy rooms have. I wanted the object that the player would interact with to be the focal point of the room, so I started working on this in Krita. This shrine statue has been long forgotten. It was originally erected in dedication to one of the old gods. Similar statues can be found throughout the tower. They were built with the intention of channeling the prayers of the tower's inhabitants. For now, the rest floor will use the forest environment tile set, but I might end up making a specific tile set for this and other similar rooms in the future. Now the UI for this is a little tricky because I actually want the statue to do 2 things. Obviously we need the statue to access the relic upgrade menu, but since this is a rest floor, I want the player to have the option to heal themselves at the cost of some of their essence. So I've actually broken this menu into 2 options here. The player can spend some essence here to heal themselves. I think this heals for around a third of their health or something. I don't know, I can't remember. Anyways, the player can only heal themselves one time at this statue. The other button launches the upgrade menu, which I've updated to display the player's total essence. I know I said earlier that the restroom spawns every 5 floors, but this isn't actually true. The way this works is every floor that you complete increases the chance of the rest floor staircase spawning by 10%, meaning that you are guaranteed to find at least one rest floor every 10 floors, but you'll probably find at least 2 most of the time. Also, this staircase for the rest floor is just placeholder for now. Aside from that, in terms of room generation, I saw a couple comments mentioning that the desert floor was spawning way too many quicksand tiles. Which I agree, it was. And that was happening because it was using the same value to spawn the water and hazard tiles from the other room environments. So I just switched it so that the values are now specific to every room environment. So now inside of the desert room there is now significantly less quicksand tiles. Why don't we all just take a moment to leave a like on this video? For every like on the video, Rana Falsis, the Divine Amphibian, will restore 30% of my total max health, allowing me to continue working on this game. I've been working on enemies quite a bit over the last month, since enemy mechanics are a relatively core part of the game. Originally, every enemy could spawn into every room environment. I've updated the spawning, so now each environment type has an enemy array attached to it that it will pull from when spawning enemies. So for example, the volcanic floor can spawn the skirmisher unit while the forest floor cannot. And honestly, I'm kind of on the fence with this change right now. I think this will definitely be more impactful once there are more units added to the game, but I also kind of liked how it was before, where there was a possibility of any combination of enemies that could be spawned in. But I'm going to wait and see and test this some more and see what feels better. I've also added in a small amount of scaling, so the floor's weight progressively increases, meaning as you progress through the floors, more enemies will spawn. Let's take a look at this situation. You are surrounded by a group of hooligans, and there is an enemy highlight on your tile. Which enemy do you think is about to attack? Well, it's impossible to know based off of this information, so now when an enemy is prepping an attack, this icon will appear in their overhead UI, indicating that they are the unit that's about to attack. So in the last devlog, I think the rat enemy was the only one that had been moved to the new system, so as promised, I've been working on re-adding the other enemies in as well, which includes giving them all new abilities. Starting off with the rat once again, Spinning Slash has been given away to another unit. Now the rat has an ability called Recede, which allows the rat to jump 2 to 3 tiles away in the opposite direction of where the player is currently located. The Skirmisher unit now has been given Spinning Slash, which, same as before, is an AoE attack that damages all adjacent tiles. One of the first new abilities that I worked on is called Whirling Blades. The Skirmisher selects up to 4 random tiles and instantiates a Whirling Blade object onto those tiles. These blades do damage to any unit they collide with. After being spawned, these blades expire after 4 turns. While working on some of these new abilities, I wanted certain attacks to leave hazardous effects for the upcoming turns. Abilities like Whirling Blades can cause a claustrophobic feeling for the player, especially if they're already working with a limited amount of space. I want the player to be forced to make a decision between walking on a safe tile and risk being surrounded by enemies, or taking damage from one of the blades and surviving to the next floor. Okay, so the Pikeman was originally going to get the charge ability from the demo again. However, I was running into a bug that I wasn't able to fix, so right now the Pikeman also has Spinning Slash, until I can come up with something better at least. But in terms of new abilities, the Pikeman also has Piercing Strike, which is a directional long-range thrust that targets multiple tiles and can hit through obstacles. The Spider Summoner is back with an updated sprite and a name change. The Arachnid Occultist is a combination of the Spider Summoner and the original Cleric enemy. This unit can summon up to 2 Spiderlings to help it in combat, and it can also use Mass Heal to heal allied units for a percentage of their total health. Okay, now we're getting into the more interesting stuff. The Scheming Spitter is a brand new enemy that I designed a couple weeks ago. I originally made it as a replacement for the Mole enemy. The Spitter has the Mole's original dig ability, which allows it to dig a tunnel to another tile. The Spitter's second ability is called Spit Bubble, which instantiates a bubble onto an adjacent tile. The bubble will move one tile in the direction that it was spawned in every turn until it pops either on an obstacle or a unit. This ability has gone through a couple iterations. The first version of this ability was called Spit and Swallow, which I think was such a superior name, but I needed to change it because to use the ability before, the unit would need to eat a nearby obstacle on the first turn and then spit the bubble out on the following turn. It was a really cool idea on paper, however the process of that happening made the ability feel less impactful, so I cut the obstacle eating part out to speed things up. I'm also planning on making the tunnel generated from the dig ability work the same way as the quicksand tiles do, because there's a cool interaction between the bubble and the quicksand tiles which causes the bubble to jump around the room, so I'm hoping to leverage that with the tunnels as well. Another new enemy I worked on is the Devious Pollywog, which is a new version of the raccoon enemy from previous devlogs. I never liked the raccoon design, so I'm happy it's gone now. The Pollywog has the raccoon's teleport ability, allowing it to swap positions with any obstacle in the room. Its other new ability is Call Flames, which is a targeted pattern attack that can be used at any range. It instantiates a fire object onto the targeted tiles. Similar to the Whirling Blade objects, these fire objects expire after 4 turns. And for anyone interested, this is the process that the design for this enemy went through from sketch to outline to illustration. If you made it to this point in the video, I hope you're at least somewhat interested in the game. Consider heading over to the Penumbra Tower Steam page and adding it to your wishlist. Wishlisting the game helps Steam know that people are interested in the game, causing it to potentially be pushed to more people. So when I showed the staircase in the last devlog, I got a ton of comments saying I should add in a keyholder enemy. That way the player won't have to kill every single enemy on every floor. So I did. I made it so when enemies are spawned, there's a 50% chance that one of them will be randomly selected as the keyholder. When the keyholder dies, a key is dropped on the ground. When the player picks up the key, all the doors in the room become unlocked. You guys know I love adding player choice into the game, and this change aligns with that. Because the keyholder gives the player the option to skip killing some of the enemies, the player may end up with less essence than they normally would, resulting in them not upgrading their relics as much as normal. So there's definitely some give and take there. Aside from that, the rest of the work I did was just a bunch of small balance changes to various abilities, relic effects, and essence scaling, all of which are still being tested and will probably get changed again, which is why I'm not going to get into it. If you made it this far in the video, I really appreciate it, and it's time for the relic brainstorming session of the video. I can't remember how many relic effects I said I was going to list off, and I'm too lazy to check, so I'm just going to list off 5 new effects. The following relics are going to be considered corrupted relics, which usually have an upside and a downside. Okay, so in no particular order, half your total max health and deal double damage. Attack twice, but deal half damage. Attack damage bonuses are applied to thorns, and you cannot attack. When enemies die, they explode on adjacent tiles. Basic attacks deal no damage, other damage sources are doubled. Not even sure how I'm going to implement those yet, so hopefully I'll figure it out now that I've shown them. Anyways, that's everything that I worked on over the last month. I know it really wasn't organized and it was all over the place as usual, but I think we're getting close to being ready for another version of the demo. That way you guys can get to play the game finally. Just need to add in those relics that I mentioned and get the boss working again, so thanks for watching. Wishlist Penumbra Tower on Steam, and I'll see you in the next devlog.